So mate, pre-season is a pretty hectic time. How do you look after yourself as well as the players at the same time?
I think it comes down to practice what you preach, isn't it, really? You try and set those standards for the players. You're telling them to do everything that they need to be doing. And then if you're rocking up feeling unwell, crap sleep, just constantly tired, eating the wrong stuff, that's not going to be beneficial, is it?
No, it's definitely our job as well as all the performance staff, is to bring some energy to the environment, because that's when the players are lacking it, because they're doing a lot of work. We've definitely got to do that. So are there things that you might do with menus and stuff that you might do with the players and things like that during pre-season when it's tough and you need a bit of a mood lift and things like that? Or?
Yeah, I mean, footballers in particular, they love their chocolate. So any way we can incorporate that into something certainly brings them together. It's a good little bit of a bond, isn't it? So if they see brownies and things like that, yes, we can influence it with a bit of beetroot and stuff like that. But ultimately, just a brownie, when they're training that hard, what harm is a little bit of a brownie going to do?
Well, yeah, and it's going to fuel all that work they're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I definitely think as well, the rugby community, I think a barbecue after the end of the training week always goes down well. If we've got the ability to do that, they can eat together, which is always good for the mood in the camp. And after a hard week, it always goes down well if they see the charcoal starting to spark up as they're finishing the last session. But
yeah, nice hog roast or something. Yeah,
it definitely keeps that excitement towards the end of the week as well.
Yeah, and obviously if they're training in hot temperatures as well that time of the year, and you're getting some ice lollies out, some slushies and things like that, again, that's a nice little mood lift for them, isn't it? It helps them cool down as well, regulate the temperatures, sweating a lot. Yeah, that can help, can't it?
Yeah, definitely. And what do you do for like yourself at the end of the day? Have you got a little routine that you do sometimes to just be able to switch off a bit each day, or?
I think it's generally just catching up with family more than anything, spending that bit of time with the kids, with the wife, switching off from technology, things like that, a bit of downtime, and then a bit of reflection.
Yeah.
I think, how's the day gone? I'm sure you've thought about, oh yes, that's been good, that's not. And right, what can I do tomorrow, or how's this week been? Things that, so you don't go into sleep, just everything's rolling around in your head.
Yeah, absolutely. I reckon that journey in the way on the car on the way back home, I always try and sit there and just think about, right, what did go well, what went down well with the group, what were the things you don't anticipate? Because I think there's always things that happen. There's always training schedules that change, or there's little contingencies that you start to build into your plan, and then it means that when those do happen, you can roll with it and you can appear like everything is under control, but you've got everything sorted. So, and I completely agree on that.
Yeah, that's it. How about when you're at home? Do you do anything in particular like to help you sleep and improve things like for the next day? Or
I think you're absolutely spot on with the technology, because there's always that the days are so busy that you might find at the end of the day you're doing some of the little bits of individual work that you need to do. And I think if you get those done and you put a line under it, you can then just get rid of the screens and get rid of the laptop. I always get some training done in the evening, because there's no time to train during the day, because you start early, you finish late. It's just a question of trying to fit in a bit of training to keep yourself feeling good, and trying to prioritise that sleep and make sure that you're getting to bed early enough, because the mornings and the starts are often really early, so that's always a big one.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, making sure you make that time for yourself to get some training done. It's a mood lift, isn't it? It makes you feel better, but also if you've got the other staff around you as well, then it helps that little bit of a bonding time with them as well, unless you like doing something by yourself. But yeah, definitely an important thing, isn't it? So what's your thoughts in preparation for pre-season then? Is there anything that you would typically do at the start or in the weeks before, so you're going into it feeling ready?
Yeah, I think it's always the chance at the end of the season. You're obviously when the season finishes, you've probably done your targets for players to return, and you've organised all that with your role within that performance group. So everything, the players know where they are in terms of what their targets might be to return, and there's always that kind of big breathe out and have a little bit of time just to clear your head. But I definitely think that period, whilst the players are away and doing some remote training, it's time for us as practitioners to probably get all of our systems, a little bit of a review, see what, review the year, see what worked well, what's been going well, where have the challenges been during the year, and then, right, what things can we refine? Where in the systems that we've got in place, where can we remove any of those little bumps in the road, so that when we get back into it, there's no time to do that then.
Yeah, of
Because
course.
I think the biggest mistake I made as a young practitioner was definitely thinking, oh, well, I can just keep those ticking over whilst I'm in, and during pre-season, there's no way of doing that. So I think it's, reviewing it, getting those systems in place and updating things. And it's then sometimes changing the visuals as well, because when they return, you want them to feel like something's different. Even if the material that we're educating with is the same, we might want to just try and change how things look, how things feel, maybe in the dining room and spaces like that, because then it feels new and it gets them engaged with it again as soon as they come back through the door.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. I think having that little bit of a plan and reflection of what has gone well, what could be improved on, with that little bit of alteration where something's a bit more appealing or something that they're going to look at, isn't it? Where it's just, it's just same old, I've read that, yeah, I know what I'm doing. Whereas you can actually put some key little new information points, just another way of thinking, helping them to make that bit of a thought process, isn't it? I guess.
Yeah. And you often step back. When you step back out of it as well, you can zoom out a little bit and look at the big picture. And there might be things that over the year you can say, oh, I've consistently reinforced that, and they're good at that now. This year, not that you can just rely on things to stay the same, because you still have to reinforce things, but it might be that you can start to expand on certain topics and get them a little bit of a greater depth of knowledge for those who need it or want it, and that just keeps the ball rolling and keeps those improvements coming across the group as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess from a food perspective as well, obviously we're planning the menus. What have the players enjoyed? What's not gone down so well? What other little improvements could be made there? Is there anything that you can recall on, like, yeah, I know that's worked, but this hasn't, therefore I've done that?
Yeah, athletes will always be pretty direct with feedback, I think.
Oh yeah.
So it is definitely a question of just making a little bit of a note of that during the year, and the good things will always stand out, as will the things that don't go so well. So yeah, if you can start to just reframe some of those, rebrand almost some of the bits and pieces in those rooms, then yeah, like you say, all of a sudden information that they've had before stands out, and they can sort of access that a little bit differently, and it definitely gets another lift in how they approach some of those habits as they get back into it, because it's such a great time to make big shifts, to make massive improvements, that the prep goes a long way to making that happen. Obviously we probably give the athletes some targets to come back in at. They don't always come back at those targets. No, most of them will spend some time during the off season ticking over and doing some of that remote training they might have been given. What do you see? What are the kind of big mistakes that you tend to see with athletes once they get back into pre-season?
Yeah, I, like you say, I think it's good that they've had that time to recover, to rest, and then making sure they're coming back in that same sort of ballpark, obviously body weight and the condition that they're coming back in. If they're not at that point and they've relaxed a bit too much during off season, then they think, right, okay, yeah, pre-season is my time to drop the body fat. Whereas, well, you could have done a bit of that in the off season. Now you're just focusing on your fitness. And I've seen players, because they're trying to lose that body fat, they're not focusing on the performance or building the muscle and the strength for those key adaptations we want. So they're under fueling.
Yeah.
And there's not enough, particularly carbohydrates. That's always the first thing, isn't it, that they're dropping. And with the amount of training that they're doing and the intensities they're training at, it's key, isn't it?
And I think that's the message we often try and get to athletes is, if you complete all of that pre-season, you're less likely to get injured, you're more available for selection, and that's ultimately, as your job, your role within that team, that's what you want. So I definitely see, like you say, athletes come back and it's that almost that attitude of, well, I can gain muscle and I can lose body fat all at the same time because we're doing so much training. And to a certain extent you can achieve that, but it's never beyond their previous best. They're not accruing more muscle mass in that time. They're just regaining a little bit they might have lost. But like you say, as soon as they start under fueling, you're endangering illness, injury, lose some days, start missing some sessions, and then all of a sudden a starting player can end up being on the bench or worse, and they're looking for reasons. But it does start with that off-season period. I think when athletes look after themselves there, it's a springboard into the next year. It's not this sort of big dip in ready to just come in and go, oh, we're doing so much training, I'll be fine, because it makes our lives tough, because I think we're then trying to almost cover too much, and we're expected to magically make have an athlete do both at the same time, whereas to a certain extent you've got to have a clear goal, and I think that's the big message: is pick your priorities, and let's work on them in that period, not come back having to just get back to where we were before.
Yeah, definitely, mate. Absolutely, I fully agree with that. And I think with some of the athletes that might be coming back, and they're like, right, okay, what are those extra 1% that I can really pull out this season? And so whether it is typically a supplement, isn't it? Whereas they put that ahead of the food. So yeah, is there anything there that you can recall like, yeah, that's not that's not the right way?
Oh, definitely. I think there is that reliance on well, you know, I'll just do this and do this, I'll take these couple of supplements, and that will mean that I can make those shifts. And I think it's like that mentality of, like you say, those 1%ers or those small margins are amplified by having a good base. So if they get their base right and they come back in, you know, their body composition's in a good place, even if they've been expected to gain some lean mass during the off-season period, because let's face it, that's probably the best time to do it, because they're not having to maybe do the same running volume, and actually they can push on then during pre-season, and those 1%ers of those marginal gains will actually be realised because they're in a good spot to actually do it, whereas they'll start to sort of look for more and more magic bullets.
Yeah, of course.
And it's actually, right, let's be really clear and simple. Get your big rocks in place, and then you'll be able to sort of maximise those small margin efforts. Whereas let's get all those things right during the off season, and then you can push through into the season being in really good shape and actually progressing year on year. I think that's the big thing, is athletes can just sort of do this cyclical yo-yoing a little bit if they don't make a meaningful effort during the off season as well as that pre-season period.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, how many times have you heard a player saying, well, this has always worked for me, so I'm just gonna do that? Yeah,
exactly. And it's like, well, do you want to then be that better athlete than you were 12 months ago or 18 months ago? Well, that's the period of time to do it, really, is that time of the year, because you're not playing every week, you've not got the fatigue of that. You can almost brand it and sell it to athletes a little bit stronger, because they start to realise, actually, you know what, I'm not getting bashed around in rugby, or, you know, they've got the soreness you've got in football from playing 3 times a week. This is the time of year where I can really thrive on my physical aspects and doing that. So yeah, it's an easy sell, but it can be a hard one at times.
Can't adjust.
Obviously, sessions are at least usually 2 or 3 sessions a day between the gym and on the field, and that's across all sports, really, isn't it? I mean, rugby, football, all those team sports, we see multiple sessions every day. How, if you were to pick those times during the day where you're really hammering messages through to players in terms of recovery, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I think it's particularly around that aspect of helping them to refuel. It's fundamental for them, so they're aware of, right, okay, I've just busted gut out in that first session. Are you going to go into this next session in the same feeling of how you were at the start of the last? How can we get there? And we want to make sure we're getting in the protein, getting in the carbohydrates, rehydrating, you know, those typical 3 hours of recovery, those little key messages which we always use of, right, what will that look like in terms of what you need to put back into your body? And I think with the utilisation of things like your milk, your smoothies, your recovery drinks, aspects of other food, snacky, picky bits which we can make available for them, make it visual, make it colourful. And it's always good to talk to them about food, isn't it?
I think that you're absolutely bang on there with it's what it looks like. I think that's the big thing in pre-season, is it, because athletes don't necessarily want to engage. They've not got the energy necessarily to think too hard about these things. It needs to be that, yes, it's habits, but it's what does that look like on a plate, or what does, you know, that's, I think in the dining room, that's where some of those kind of example plates, or just the visual, like you said, the visual triggers to just go, yes, right, I've got some of my protein-rich repair foods, I've got some fuel in there, right, what do I prefer there? Do I want something with a bit more fibre, a bit less fibre because of how I feel? And then they can make choices, but it's just easy, and it's visual, and the cues are all there for them, so they're not having to think too hard about it. It just becomes part of that routine, which is kind of why that time of year is so good for building habits, is they're doing it so many times.
Yeah.
You know, it is repeated, isn't it? It really ingrains some of those thought processes in the year. And like you said earlier, if you've got an athlete who's left themselves a bit of a mountain to climb, and they're under fueling a little bit, that also breeds poor habits when it comes into really intense days in the season. So yeah, I think it's that element of, like, those priorities, clear visuals, and then they can actually do that and make it happen. And it's fun time of year for us as well, isn't it? Because you get to spend good quality time with the chefs as well, and in the food production, and you get to test a few things out. You get to see how things go down, and because you've got lots of options out there, you can quite quickly find some favourites that the athletes will start to look for and ask for then.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think going back on what we talked about before about building those foundations of the diet, we're looking at that pre-season period as the foundations of the season. So if we get that right in terms of the recovery, knowing what they need to be taking on after the sessions, they're going to take that into the training and after the matches, especially like in football, like you say, playing once, twice, 3 times a week. It kind of rolls in those habits, and where we can make it creative with the chefs. What foods do we know the athletes enjoy to have at that point? And when it comes back to putting that back in throughout the season, they can kind of link it together, can't they?
Yeah, and I think it's nice as well because you can almost align things as well with which recovery modalities they're going to do as well. Because I don't know with you lads with the football. Obviously, the sessions where you don't want them getting the ice baths in pre-season because you're looking for adaptations in other ways, and it might be, we'll certainly look at using heat and sauna and hot baths, things like that, to try and maximise some of those adaptations. So you can kind of sit and align certain visuals and certain plates with days, and you can periodise the food, but you can also align it with how they're going to recover from a actual physical perspective as well. So they start to think about, it's been a heavy gym day, right? I'm not going to go and sit in the ice bath because we don't want to interfere with that. But also, I want to make sure I've hit my repair, my protein target there, because I want to maximise all that work we've done in the gym today. So start to pick threads through that periodised plan, and it starts to sort of take shape where they begin to realise, and it becomes those automatic habits of association which we can get really embedded in them in that time of year.
Yeah, absolutely.